Thanks everyone for joining us today. This session is being recorded just so everyone is aware, and I'll start with the land acknowledgement for Athabasca University. Athabasca University respectfully acknowledges that we live on and work on the traditional lands of the Indigenous people, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis of Canada. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous people, and we give thanks to them. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is our last session in the 5-part series of the Developing Your Research series. So these sessions have been recorded. They are available on the university right site YouTube page for viewing afterwards. And the Now teams, I realized, shares the recording directly with all of the participants in a link right after the session. So that's really nice. You'll be able to have quick access to that as well. So again, this session is being recorded just so everyone is aware. You'll notice that there are no cameras and mics enabled right now, just because we do have a lot of people in the session. So we are just preventing some background noise. But when it comes time for question and answer period, please feel free to raise your hand. I can unmute you, or you can also use the chat feature as well. So with that, I will hand the floor back over to Joanna.
And we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks so much everyone who is attending today. We're going to be presenting on the literature review and writing process. I hope you're all ready for that. We have a link to the slides here, so I'll put that in the chat for you if you want to follow along. They should have also been emailed to you. We also have a handout that should have kind of overview and more links for you there. And we will be using, a lot of this was pulled from a course that Sarah Jean and my predecessor made on literature reviews. I'm giving you a preview mode because we're not able to upload it at the moment, so I'll send it here. My name is Joanna Nemeth, and I'm the Managing Librarian for Information Services here at Athabasca University Library. So I mainly oversee all the public service work, as well as assisting with all of your research questions. And both overall and in doing instruction, obviously, like I'm doing right now. So overall, I'm here to help with all of that stuff. And I'll let Sarah Jean introduce herself.
Thanks, Joanna. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah Jean Watt, the Right Site Coordinator. And we have a lot to cover today, and so we'll save questions for the end, but please note down our contact information in case you want to get in touch with any questions that come up. We always welcome that. And just a quick note that you can turn on live captions if you like. Click on the More button with 3 dots on it, and then scroll down to click Language and Speech, then turn on live captions. You can also mute the chat notifications under More and Settings. And Joanna will get us started.
All right, thanks, Sarah Jean. So our goal today is to provide you with an array of patterns, strategies, and resources to help you approach every aspect of writing your literature review. We'll start off with the purpose of a literature review, then we'll talk about different forms they take and their function. We'll shift into preparation and process for searching and talk about when to stop looking. Sarah Jean will take us through the structure of a literature review, and we'll talk about how to find samples. As I already linked to, we've got a course in RISE that you can also run through that should cover most of this. We created the webinar and the course simultaneously. So, what is a literature review? Literature reviews provide an overview of relevant sources you explored while researching a particular topic and are designed to demonstrate to your readers how your research fits within a larger field of study. So the purpose. If we think about scholarly research as a discourse or conversation, a literature review can be thought of as capturing the parts of the conversation that are relevant to your topic and setting the scene for your research. A literature review usually consists of a summary and synthesis. So summaries capture the important information from the source, and the synthesis frames the research problem within the current research and informs how you intend to investigate the problem. The analytical features of a literature review might capture the current state of the research, discuss works in context of their contributions to the area of research, identify relationships between the works, identify thematic or conceptual division in the research, such as key schools of thought or key debates, positions on an argument, that type of thing. It might also present a chronological progression of the research on a topic. It can also identify gaps in the research, reinterpret older material or merge old and new interpretations, and situate your research within the scholarly conversation. So the key features of a literature review: identify where gaps exist within the current field of research and locate your own research within the context of the existing literature. All right, so literature reviews come in many forms and have many possible functions. They can appear within academic papers where they frame the current study or paper. We also find reviews in theses and dissertations where they come as chapters. Both of the above answer the why this topic, why this approach question. We also have literature reviews as standalone papers. So my first question is, what form of literature review are you working on? If you don't want to open up multiple windows, I put a Mentimeter in the chat there, but if you don't want to open up multiple windows, you can also write it in the chat. So it's fine if you're not working on one, but if you're working on one as part of an academic paper, part of a thesis, or a standalone literature review, we'd love to know. Sometimes it takes longer to load in the slides, so we'll refer back afterwards, since we have a lot to cover today. So next up, there are a lot of different types of literature reviews. We'll go over some of the most common types here. So we have a traditional or narrative literature review. This is a summary of a topic organized thematically or chronologically. Then we have within the narrative or traditional literature reviews, we have historical literature reviews, which fall within this category and examine research over time to show progression or evolution of ideas. Then we have theoretical reviews. These are considered as another subset of narrative reviews and are used to establish what theories exist, how theories are related, and how they've been investigated. They often are used to show inadequacies of current theories for emerging research problems. Methodological reviews, also considered a subset of narrative reviews, focus on how research was done, not necessarily the findings. So not what someone says, but how they came to say it. This type of review highlights how researchers draw on wide collections of knowledge and use varied approaches to capture and analyze data. It also helps highlight disciplinary trends, gaps in data collection, if they're all qualitative or all quantitative, and any ethical issues to be aware of. Then we get into argumentative literature reviews, which are intended to establish contrarian viewpoints by selectively positioning literature to refute or support arguments, assumptions, or problems noted in the existing research. Then we have integrative reviews, which generate new frameworks or perspectives through a detailed critique and synthesis process. These reviews should have an exhaustive literature search, meaning all the literature on this specific topic should be considered. Thorough integrative reviews follow methodologically sound practices for primary research, including meeting standards for rigor and replication. And systematic reviews are a standardized methodology used to prepare an overview of existing evidence. They're used quite a lot in the health sciences, but are gaining traction in the social sciences. It requires a clearly formed research question and pre-specified methods to identify and evaluate relevant research. In a systematic review, you carefully document your search, evaluation, and summary. Meta-analyses are an extension of systematic review process and involve data consolidation steps. So my next question is, what literature review type are you working on? I know last time we did this presentation, we found out that a lot of our students were working on narrative reviews. So I added in more about narrative reviews in this section because of that. So that's why it's always useful to get an idea. So I think if I escape from this, I can show it on my screen. Okay, there we go. So we can see narrative reviews are winning, but we've got a few of the other ones. So that's always really useful info to have and interesting to find out where you're all coming from. All right, so how to prep for a literature review. Let's shift over to how to prepare for and get started with your literature review. Start with articulating your problem or question. What topic are you studying? What do you know about it, and what do you want to know? This is where you can form a research question or a hypothesis. Begin your literature search, find materials relevant to your question or hypothesis, and fill the information gaps. This is likely going to be an iterative process, as you can see here. Search, review, read, refine your problem, search, and so on. If you need help developing your search string and getting into more of the advanced searching options within the library, I'm just going to share our Search Like a Pro guide. Also in the recording playlist we sent, I did do a Search Like a Pro session earlier in this series. So when you're getting into the evaluating your items, you'll need to question, is your literature relevant, significant, key to the discourse? Are you missing key authors? Check out the literature reviews for the works you have. Are there common authors listed? Do you already have those authors in your collection? I like to use the CRAP framework to evaluate sources. So that includes assessing currency. Does the date affect the validity of the conclusions? So if you're looking at, something that maybe hasn't, history, art theories, you're probably not going to have as recent changes as there might have been for a new medical practice. Relevance. Is the paper relevant to your topic and significant in the discussion on your research problem or topic? Accuracy. Are the claims, arguments based on reliable and valid data sources? Are you able to check? How transparent is the methodology, data collection, and analysis process? Authority. Who are the authors? What experience or expertise do they have? And is it relevant to the discourse? And purpose. Is it objective? What do you think was the intention of writing this? So begin your analysis and interpretation. See if the gaps can be filled as you analyze and interpret. And this is where we start to ask ourselves when to stop looking. And I know I get this question a lot from students, so I feel like it's always useful to discuss. How do you know if you've thoroughly reviewed the literature and found all you can at this time? So you want to start by looking for repeating patterns. If the same thing is being said just by different people, then this likely demonstrates that the research problem has hit a conceptual dead end. At this point, consider, does your study extend current research? Does it forge a new path, or does it merely add more of the same thing being said? Look at sources the authors cite in their works. Do you see the same authors being cited in each paper? This is often an indication that no new ideas have been generated to address the research problem. And citation tracking. So you can use Scopus, Web of Science, and Google Scholars cited by option to see who has cited the works you're exploring. If the same authors are being cited again and again, this may indicate no new literature has been cited on this topic. Our Search Like a Pro guide, and I also added this to the literature review course, goes through using the cited by section as well. So in the preview mode I sent above, you'll see that. And I will hand it over to Sarah Jean for the next section.
Thanks, Joanna. I'll share my screen. Okay, so now we'll go over all the elements that you might include in your literature review. And so most of these, though maybe not all, will be relevant in all cases. You're really the writer and the most knowledgeable person on your topic, so you can decide, but if you're not sure, you may need to get input from your professor, your supervisor, or you can come talk to a writing specialist at the Right Site. So the components of a typical literature review are the title page, abstract, and possibly a preface, introduction, background, methodology, reviewer results, discussion and/or conclusion, and references. And today we'll focus mainly on introduction, methodology, reviewer results, and discussion. These will usually be included in standalone literature reviews for coursework, though possibly without section headings, falling simply under a literature review heading, sandwiched between the introduction and conclusion. And they're definitely included in the literature review chapter of your thesis or dissertation. Throughout all sections of your review, you should always keep in mind your research question. Make sure to continually relate to your research question in some clear way, starting with the abstract and introduction and moving through to all sections of the review, even all paragraphs. Now, if you find you have too much material after writing a first draft, you can ask yourself at each section and paragraph whether it relates strongly enough to your research question. If it doesn't, this might be a signal that you want to cut it out. The abstract, as with any paper, is a short summary of the entire review. There are no secrets in the abstract. It actually includes your overall findings and conclusions. So this is one reason that the abstract is written after you've written your review, to fully capture the contents of the review and its conclusions. A reader should be able to read the abstract and understand the main points of the review without reading the review itself. A strategy to accomplish this is to include 1 to 2 sentences in your abstract that address each section and theme. And note that the abstract often also includes keywords used to obtain the literature found. If you find it more straightforward, you can even label your abstract with short sections, as this one by Joanna et al. Does. For example, you might include objective or purpose, design and methods, results, and recommendations or conclusions. And note that even though this might look like bullet points, you should only write in full sentences. You may not need to include an abstract depending on your assignment specifications. APA 7 doesn't require an abstract for student papers, but one might be required by your instructor or professor, especially at the graduate level, so you might want to ask if you're not sure. The preface is optional, and it's placed on the page after the abstract and might look something like this. Hart recommends including one if it will give insight into how and why you chose your topic. A preface includes information that you'd like to share with the reader, but that doesn't have a direct bearing on your research. For example, it might be personal, a personal statement about the research's relationship to your background. It can also touch on who your intended audience is, as well as the scope and intention of your research. All of this can provide context to your readers so they understand the motivation behind the review. Moving on to the introduction, don't expect to perfect it in a first draft. The purpose of an introduction at the beginning of the writing process is to ensure you understand your own purpose. It's a way for you to set the stage for your writing, not provide a polished introduction for the audience. It's really best to revise it with the audience in mind once you've written the body. Some writers even prefer to write the introduction later, though you may just want to use it as an ink shedding exercise to help get you started. And once the introduction is complete, here are 5 basic things that it should achieve. First, announce the topic of your review. Do this in a way that grabs the reader's attention and hooks the reader in. State the purpose of your review. The audience should understand what objectives the review will accomplish. This could also identify the gap that you found through reviewing the literature. Explain the relevance of the topic. The introduction will make clear the significance of the topic so that you can demonstrate why it's worth discussing. Establish your credibility. Through your opening statements, the reader should understand that you have a deep understanding of the topic and the expertise to discuss it in detail. Now, even if you don't feel like an expert, you might be the only person who has conducted this particular review with this set of literature, so you are well poised to speak on it. And finally, preview the main points that you'll make in the main body of the text. Demonstrate the structure of the review, for example, what sections it contains or the main point of each section. In Joanna et al., you can see some of the parts of the introduction at work. First, they announce their topic of geriatric education of undergraduate nurses, which you can see in yellow. Next, they demonstrate the relevance of the topic in blue by explaining the gap that exists in the geriatric nursing curriculum. They establish their credibility throughout, in pink, for example, by referencing major studies or other work on the topic, as well as by discussing the topic in a clear manner. They end on their purpose in green, which is to examine the effectiveness of an education program with a geriatric component. This introduction doesn't directly preview all the main points of the body, but they do lay out 3 themes that are identified and expanded upon in the review and discussion, with the literature categorized into those 3 to draw out specific findings. And we'll talk more about how to do that later. You can explore Joanna L's structure more in our mini course that Joanna has provided a link to in the chat. Now we'll discuss the background. As Garson explains, including a background is useful for showing how the topic has gained significance over time. Imagine the issue you're investigating as developing through time and being gradually responded to by experts in your field. In the background section, you have, in a way, begun your review of the literature, but you might be focused on foundational texts and research at this point. This includes what Garson calls the historical response of the academic community, along with milestone studies and sources that define the topic but don't contribute directly to your narrowed research question. As you move into the review section, you'll be focusing on research that has a direct bearing on your specific topic or question, whereas the background gives an overview of the general research related to the topic, especially through a historical lens. Jan et al.'s background section shows how this can be done. They begin in yellow with how the topic has gained and is gaining significance over time by showing the rapid growth of the aging population and the shortfall of nurses that can't keep up. They show the contributions of foundational texts on the topic in blue, referencing the work of numerous commissions, institutes, foundations, and associations. They then detail the milestone studies in green, which perhaps don't speak directly to their specific question about the effectiveness of a geriatric care component in nursing programs, but that do speak generally to the lack of the component, demonstrating a general gap. And the authors end by returning to the significance of the research question or gap by showing why the research is needed given the history of the topic. Okay, so now we'll review these initial components of the literature review. We've got a short true or false quiz here. If you like, you can put your answers of T and F in the chat or true or false. So first, you should think of the review as a cohesive whole centered around your research question. Would that be true or false? Marcella says true. Kevin says true. All right, I agree. Yes, that is true. The review is a cohesive whole centered around your research question. What about the abstract should be written before the review is complete? Would that be true or false? Kevin's jumping right in there with false. All right, yes, great. Lots of you are participating and agree. Usually the abstract would be written after, unless, of course, like the introduction, you kind of want to use it as like an ink shedding exercise. Next, the introduction announces the review's topic, states the review's purpose, and explains the topic's relevance. Is that true or false? True, right. We've got several of the purposes of the introduction here. And finally, the background uses foundational texts and milestone studies to show how the topic has gained significance over time. Would that be true or false? Jennifer says true. Christopher agrees. Okay. All right. Great review. Thanks for participating in that. Joanna's going to lead us through methodology now.
All right, nice to see that everyone seems to be grasping all of these semi-difficult topics. Now on to methodology. So in the method section, you'll want to address what you did, how you did, and why. You'll want to tell your readers your intentions, what happened, any changes or shifts that happened, and why they happened. Did you run into any obstacles? What were they? How did it all get resolved, and what did you end up doing? Keep it brief but informative. So the questions to ask yourself are, what happened? Did anything change or shift as you worked on the research? Did you run into any obstacles? If so, what were they? How did it all get resolved, and what did you end up doing? All right. So your methodology should include your selection criteria, your search description, your data collection and analysis, and your study quality and bias. So diligent note-taking is going to be your friend here. You want to keep track of what you searched, where you searched, what you found or did not find. You can learn more about journaling your search in our Keeping Organized webinar, which is in our recorded playlist that I sent out already. Consider including reflective pieces as you search, not simply the keywords and numbers you found, but your thoughts as you search and scan results. For example, if you're searching in Medline and you think to yourself, wait, all these articles are from the same journal, you should write that down. Keep track of those thoughts as they can help you when you're writing up your method section. If you are doing an integrative review, systematic review, or meta-analysis, you'll need to be even more detailed in your note-taking process. For those method sections, your readers will expect to see a summary of all the steps noted in the list here. So selection criteria, search description, data collection and assessment processes, and how you identified the data needed to inform your results. So this is basically what it's going to look like. You're going to write a plan for your review. You're going to search studies. So you're going to have a whole bunch. Then you'll sift through and select the ones you like, extract the data from those studies, assess the quality of the studies, combine the data, and discuss and conclude overall findings. And then you can disseminate your information. So for selection criteria, we want to know how you decided what studies were included and excluded. So the types of participants might be a reason. You might only focus on women or particular age ranges, or people living in a particular region. Interventions, the measures. So the search description needs to be meticulously documented so it can be assessed and also replicated, that being the important part. Someone else needs to be able to go in and replicate your search. A full search strategy should be provided in your paper. And this strategy should include all the sources searched. So that's any databases, websites, anything that you hand searched, like journals or conference proceedings, all gray literature, any people or organizations contacted, all dates of the last search for each database and the limiters used. So that's where you might have a limiter to like 2019 to 2025, particular language limiters or publication status restrictions. If you're only going to use stuff that's been published, as opposed to, you might limit out preprints. The full search strategies for each database should be included in your abstract. Okay, so on the data collection and analysis, you should include how studies were selected for inclusion in the review, how study data were extracted from the study reports, and how study data were combined for analysis and synthesis. Consider using a flow diagram in your reporting. It can be used to capture the number of studies found, assessed, excluded, and included. It's also a great way to share with your readers the volume of literature found and considered. So you can see on this flow chart here, this is what you could use as an example. So the number of articles found within certain databases, the number removed from screening, the number that you've screened in, and then of those ones, which ones were excluded, number included in retrieval, reports not retrieved, reports assessed for eligibility, reports excluded, and your reasoning, and studies included in the review, and report of included studies. For the last part of your methods section, you should address study quality and bias. Assessments of study quality are linked to the risk of bias, and the Cochrane risk of bias tool shown here is used most often for these purposes. The first part of the tool judges the risk of bias based on what was reported in the study, and the second part assigns a risk of bias rating. The ratings are low, high, or unclear. Cochrane also has a tool to assess the risk of bias in the risk of bias tool. It's a crucial step that requires rigorous assessment and thorough documentation, as these studies form the basis of your results. And I'll share the link for that. Okay, I had a feeling I need to find the updated link, so I'll find that where Sarah Jean is going over reviewing our results.
Thanks, Joanna. Now, through the inclusion of a methodology section, you can really see how the literature review is truly a type of research in itself. You're not just reporting what others have found, but you're actually conducting your own research to obtain some result. And this is why Aviard suggests that the review section actually be called results. Your review is the result of your research. This isn't just a random reporting of accumulated data. You should identify the themes within your research so you can structure your review in a way that presents the ideas that emerged in a logical order. Aviard suggests to begin with the most dominant theme and discuss the following themes thereafter. Usually focus in particular on the article's results and discussion sections to gather your data. You'll probably often start sentences with such and such an author found. And this is just a preview. We're going to go over 3 different ways to structure your reviewer results: questions to answer, analysis and synthesis, and comparison and contrast. But first, here's Jan et al.'s results section. This shows how you might subdivide the results into themes. In addition to presenting the data in tables, Jan et al. Expanded on categories of significant findings in yellow and blue. You can see the themes in yellow, and in the blue, they explain overall what the studies are that contributed to that theme. So just looking at how you can answer questions, you can look at this figure from Hart, which shows questions that your literature review might answer. This can help you understand what information you might gather and how you might structure it. So not all of these will necessarily be relevant to every review, but just some of the basics are here to give you some ideas. So starting at the top here, what are the key sources? This is really a basic starter question. What are the key theories, concepts, and ideas? Within the key sources, what key ideas emerge? What do various sources have in common? Next, what are the main questions and problems that have been addressed to date? Some fundamental questions and problems of early development around the subject might appear in your background section, but as the questions and problems become more specific to your own research, you'll want to record them in your review and results section. Next, how is knowledge on the topic structured and organized? This one could be a bit trickier, but just ask yourself what types of data you've gathered. Is it subjective or objective, quantitative or qualitative, and so on? You could also determine whether your main topic has been divided into subtopics by previous researchers. I'm going to move on to this one now. What are the origins and definitions of the topic? This could be partly addressed in the background section once again, but you might still need to address the origins of the more specific aspects of the question. Any key words or concepts that weren't covered in the background's general historical approach. And it's also useful to cover how key terms are defined in the literature. And going back up toward the beginning, what are the major issues and debates about the topic? Are there any major contrasts in researchers' findings? What are the things they can agree or not agree on? What challenges have they faced in conducting their research? And finally, taking these questions as a whole, how have approaches to these questions increased our understanding and knowledge? Here you might begin your own analysis and highlight a gap. There may be a point of learning that has not yet been identified when considering all the texts together. This is the reason for conducting a literature review. Reading and comparing all of the texts together can provide insight that no one else has realized yet. In fact, as Hart mentions, conducting the literature review can actually help you in this way to narrow your topic for a larger project. How to make the literature review your own, how to explain or recast the information you've collected can be confusing when it may seem as though the data simply speaks for itself. It doesn't. It's up to you to analyze and synthesize it as the aim of your review. And Hart gives insights into how to do this. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have analysis. Analysis is the initial action you do to the data you've gathered. To select, you choose what's relevant. To differentiate, you compare the data. To dissect, you examine the data carefully to understand it. And to break it up, you group it into subtopics. Then built upon your analysis is synthesis. Synthesis is done on those parts that are discovered through analysis. When you integrate and combine the parts, you start putting them back together according to their relationships with each other. You reorganize them into a different order than they were originally presented, and you recast them by putting them into the unique context of your paper. ART provides a worksheet template that can be used to help organize data into different topics before combining and recasting it in your writing. The template is designed for the use of multiple sources at once, and it allows you to group sources by topic and explore their similarities and differences. This in turn gives you a way to structure your review by theme or topic. And there's a link to this template on our handout. In this figure, ART also shows how two authors can be compared with one another. Some of the ones you may want to focus on are interpretation, data, and methodology. This list was developed for social sciences researchers, but it could be valuable to consider them in other fields as well, particularly the three I pointed out. Now, after the review is complete, your job is not quite done yet. You usually still have to discuss the findings and present your conclusions. As you've probably seen in many journal articles, the results section is followed by a discussion section. Here, the authors interpret the results within the context of their research question. Sometimes your discussion might be included in the review itself, depending on the assignment requirements. Your discussion will generally do the following. First, interpret the results. Aviar mentions to interpret all aspects of the results. So in other words, make sure no part of the data from the results section goes uncovered. On the flip side, don't introduce any new data. You only want to discuss the data that appeared in the results. All the relevant data needs to have appeared already in the review in order to discuss it in the discussion. Develop your argument. Remember, you should always return to your research question and seek to answer it. Emphasize the main findings and their meaning for your argument. How do they help to prove or support your answer to the research question? Answering this question can help you understand how the discussion is different from the reporting of the results. Now you're exploring the results in the context of your research topic or question. This differs from the article's discussion sections because they discuss their results in the context of their topic or questions. Critique and evaluate. From an unbiased perspective, critically evaluate the literature's strengths and weaknesses, as well as those of your own. This could mean acknowledging your review's limitations, such as what in the literature was included or excluded. And based on all the findings together, draw your conclusions about what should be done in light of these results. In a few slides, we'll look at argumentation patterns that will help you to do this in a logical way that relates to your research question. Sometimes this means proposing your own study to fill a gap. And at the beginning of their discussion section, Joanna and Elle provide a mini introduction that briefly summarizes the method and purpose of the review, then states their main finding when the data of all the relevant literature is taken into account. That's in green. Like their results section, Joanna and Elle's discussion section is broken down into several subsections, highlighted in yellow. So the ones you see here reflect the three major themes presented in the results. But this time, instead of focusing solely on the studies, the overall findings are interpreted for their meaning to the author's research question, seen in blue. For example, in 5.2, geriatric attitude outcome, at the top of the right-hand column, the authors begin by declaring their surprise at the overall attitude score within the studies. Now they're discussing and evaluating the findings within the context of their research. They're commenting on them. Now, you might not need to split your discussion into the themed subsections with headings. Sometimes that can feel repetitive of the results section. You might find in some cases that discussion of the different themes just overlaps naturally, and so those subheadings aren't always necessary. Here you can see the authors discussing the implications and significance of their findings. They evaluate and critique the literature, as well as make recommendations in pink. They're stating what should be done in light of their findings. Finally, Joanna et al. Also included a separate subsection within their discussion for their review's limitations in green. This ensures that they're being forthright and giving a clear picture of any potential weaknesses to their research. And just a reminder that you can explore Joanna et al.'s structure more in our mini course linked to in the slides and handout. Okay, now let's take a look at argument structure, or ways that you can envision framing your discussion section to successfully argue your main idea. There are several possible patterns you can start from. The most basic structure moves from problem to solution and includes the disadvantages of the problem, the advantages of the solution, and refutation of possible objections to the proposed solution. This could also be as simple as identifying a gap, then filling the gap. The discussion or conclusion will likely give you the opportunity to focus on the solution and filling of the gap. As you move toward filling the gap, you'll likely cover the disadvantages of nothing being done, the advantages of addressing the gap, and refutation of objections to your proposed method of addressing the gap. You can think of the argument structure as in play throughout your entire paper, but it's especially important in the discussion section because the discussion focuses in many ways on the recommendations you've come to through the course of your research. Here's an adaptation of Hart's argumentation patterns that you can review more closely from the slides that Crystal sent. These patterns include problem awareness, cause and effect, and possible solution. You can see in all three of these patterns how the argument is built by identifying or describing some kind of problem or gap and gradually moving toward addressing or providing a solution for the problem or gap. The solution comprises your recommendations or conclusions, which again could mean proposing a study that will contribute to filling the gap. In order to show why previous solutions are inadequate and why previously identified causes are irrelevant, you might engage in criticism and evaluation of the literature you've gathered. For studies that support your own conclusions, you must also take a critical perspective and evaluate their limitations. As you do, remain objective and unbiased to preserve the reliability of your work. Criticism can comprise agreeing or disagreeing with a position and showing with evidence for why you agree or disagree. You must then defend your position. So again, give the evidence for the strength of your position while refuting counter arguments. You may want to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of the literature you've reviewed and are now discussing, and address the strengths, weaknesses, and limitations of your own critique and review. Looking more at how to address the strengths and weaknesses of the literature, be sure to acknowledge strengths or advantages even where you don't agree with the overall approach or findings. You can still reject the aspects of the research that are flawed, but you should take a balanced approach that avoids categorizing something as all good or all bad. Potential weaknesses can include fallacies, inadequacies, and limitations. Fallacies are misguided or flat-out false beliefs that have been presented as evidence. Inadequacies could include inconsistencies, omissions, or other flaws in the research. Limitations, which often arise from external constraints, are usually recognized by the authors of the research, but it's possible that you might identify other weaknesses that could have had an impact on their conclusions. And your conclusion might actually be part of the discussion section, as the discussion can really lead naturally to concluding thoughts. However, it can also be its own section. The conclusion is your final opportunity to emphasize your main idea, the answer to your research question, and leave an impression on the reader about the significance of your findings and recommendations. As with any conclusion, it's good practice to include the following points as laid out by Garson. A reminder of the research question or problem, why it's significant to solve the problem, and how the research presented plays a role in the solution. This is also a way of saying how your review makes an original contribution to your field through the filling of a gap. And here's a final quiz for review. So again, we've got true or false. The review or results section should identify themes and present them in a logical order. Would that be true or false about the review or results section? Review or results section should identify themes and present them in a logical order. Okay. Looks like some trues are coming in. Exactly. This is how you can approach your review or results section. Remember, you're not just reiterating data from articles, you're actually identifying themes and presenting them in a logical way. Next, analysis dissects the data, while synthesis recombines it. Is that true or false? All right, we've got some truths. Exactly. Analysis is a dissection and synthesis puts it back together. Okay, next, an argument identifies a problem or gap and recommends a solution. True or false? Exactly. That's also true. And finally, it's important to be subjective and biased while remaining unaware of strengths and weaknesses. I think this is probably an easy one. Jackie said false. Yes, exactly. Okay, thanks for participating. All right, we already discussed our mini course. Is there anything else that I should turn it back over to you for, Joanna? Or are we ready to take some questions?
No, I think that's it. I think we can go ahead with questions.
Thanks for being such a great audience.
Yeah.
And if you've got really specific questions about your own literature review as opposed to more of a general question, then please get in touch with us. We could have an appointment at the right site to just brainstorm or help you develop a plan.
Okay, Christopher, I will just give you access to your camera and mic since you have your hand up. You should be able to, I believe, use your mic and camera now.
Coming in okay?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe some context background for the question. My education is technical in business, not without participation in literature reviews in terms of my undergrad and grad school. So a bit of a new topic for me. That being said, I've done some literature review kind of on a quasi-academic basis, and some in my work experience, which might dabble into like policy research or something academic. But at the same time, I do feel like I'm stumbling through. I kind of have a sense for what I'm doing, but the process of what a literature review is, how I should do it, how to structure it, what information, I'm kind of making it up as I go. So in one instance, I've got this giant spreadsheet with different pieces of information, trying to help synthesize it. That helps a little bit. Not really sure if I'm if there's a better way to do it. Maybe you can lend some guidance to that, rambling approach that I seem to have.
Well, I guess I'll just jump in and say, I think maybe it depends on the person, but it could help to talk it through. Maybe meet with a writing specialist, drop us an email, and we could just give you a chance to kind of talk out what you see there and all of that data. And that could help you to pull out some themes. And then once you've got some themes, it becomes a little easier to start organizing it. right? And then seeing maybe the different threads of that theme as you put those similar pieces together. I'm not sure if that's where you're at yet, but that's what I think would probably be my next step.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
thank you.
if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like you're a bit overwhelmed with the information you have. Is that right?
When I'm doing it, generally, I'm not gauged in a review right now. I've just kind of finished up a couple. One for a business article I was writing, and one for a research project that is just kind of just about done. I think there's a little bit of review there, but it's kind of overwhelming amount of information, and I feel like I'm kind of just stumbling my way through. But I think I'm not necessarily consciously I'm kind of subconsciously looking for themes, I guess. Didn't really articulate that to myself. What I'm looking for is just kind of finding my way through this dark room kind of thing. That's what it feels like.
Okay, I do agree with Sarah Jean. Booking an appointment with the right side is a good idea, but I also think, having some overarching plan, like exclusion criteria, can be a good way to kind of like decide which articles you're going to use and why. And that you can develop those as you're looking at the results as well.
Okay, yeah.
And that always helps me kind of be like, hey, which ones am I using and which ones am I not using?
Yeah, okay. Just kind of try to limit your scope.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Joanna. Thanks for bringing that forward, Christopher. I think that's a good reminder for writers that just because you have downloaded an article and read it doesn't mean that you have to use it.
Okay, thank you both.
And we had a question in the chat about how best to do a literature review as a team. One of my colleagues had a couple suggestions, so I'll send these as a link. They came in through our confidence training materials. But yeah, I think we usually kind of focus on the student side, so we haven't done a lot of like literature reviews as a team kind of documentation, but it's definitely something to think about for future presentations and instruction materials.
I'm going to assume that you're using Zotero or something like that, Megan. That was one thing that comes to mind, because you can share the articles through there. Give a thumbs up.
Yeah, see, when we start talking about group work, there are things we can think about specifically like that.
Yeah, very interesting questions. Anything else coming up?
Looks like we have one hand up. Crystal, did you need to give access or?
Yeah, I just did, Jennifer. You should be able to use your camera and your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I was just wondering if there is any sort of, I guess, database. There seems to be so many websites to sort of, the understanding types of research and everything like that. Is there any one link either within Athabasca to sort of see the different sites? There's so many internet resources, and I just want to make sure that I'm using the correct one instead of having to look through those as well to write any papers.
So what do you mean by internet resources? Like, are you talking, like what type of databases are you talking about?
Yeah, there's a lot of different information sites out there, right? So like you have the understanding review types and research, right? So you have so many different sites to sort of review and assist in writing to keep it sort of in a context that's more academic versus getting into the lines of the AI sources. Do you know what I mean? So does Athabasca have any kind of actual database of sites to sort of look at? I'm new
So
to
are
Athabasca.
you doing gray literature searching, so you don't want to use academic databases? Is that what I'm understanding? Sorry, I'm still confused.
I'm just understanding which sites are the best to look for, because there's so many.
And do you need to not use academic databases?
No, that's what I'm asking. What academic
Okay.
databases are sort of recommended
What
to be accurate?
subject? Yeah, what subject area are you in?
It's human services right now.
Okay. Does anyone know what faculty that falls under?
FHSS.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, for those types of topics, that's probably going to be more of an interdisciplinary topic, but you can find a full list of the databases the library subscribes to, and I would recommend using those to start out because you're going to skip all the AI stuff, and you can limit to peer-reviewed sources, you can limit to higher quality sources. Even if you want to look at newspapers, we have options for doing that. The main search on the library homepage searches a lot of different databases we have access to, not all of them, and it also searches our catalog, so that can be a nice place to start out. And then the other one that I usually start with would be that one and ProQuest Global, which searches all of the ProQuest databases we have access to. But if you send an email to the library with more information about your topic, we can do some more specific recommendations and some topic searches and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's just so many different internet searches that sort of lead to incorrect information. That's what I'm trying to avoid, is that information it's almost too much work to have to dissect all of the incorrect information, if that makes any sense. It's out there when you're looking up stuff. So I just wanted to go to one site and try and find the correct stuff.
Yes, totally. So yeah, I think using our databases and then also taking a look at or contacting us, we can help you a little bit more with that. I'll also share, I would say, like you say, searching outside of the library is going to end up being more work in a lot of ways. So I did just send over our evaluating web information page, but as you say, it's a lot of linear reading and doing a lot of background and trying to figure out what organization posted this and who they really are. So it can be time consuming on its own.
I'm in the philosophy class right now, and I'm looking at more things in depth and is it right? Is it correct? Is it and that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm making sure that what I'm writing is correct and how to find it faster.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I was just going to share, we also have a gray literature review. So gray literature is more of the stuff that's basically anything that's not academically published. And we have a pretty good recommendation of how to develop those types of searches if you are wanting to look for policy statements and that kind of stuff. So I'll send that over as well. This is within our business guide, so it's a little bit business focused. Good question.
Very relevant.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the session. So I just wanted to thank everyone for attending and for the engagement. Thank you again to our wonderful Right Site Library folks for doing this presentation. It's a really great presentation for all students at AU and other institutions that join us. So that's it for our research series, and we will be doing it again next year. Again, the library has already provided some links to the page, the YouTube page, where you can go and watch those recordings. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Sarah Jean, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
And thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.